This will sound very strange, but the movie Field of Dreams, the most iconic baseball movie ever made, starring James Earl Jones, in which he delivered an iconic speech about how America could be great again, and is a movie about the 1919 Chicago Black Sox cheating scandal, is a prophecy from the righteous Christian God of the Bible that is pointing to the return of Barack Obama as the president again and the Antichrist, after it is predicted that U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. And this is a prophecy that is predicting that actor James Earl Jones, the voice of Darth Vader and the voice of the Lion King, and starred in the most iconic baseball movie ever made, Field of Dreams, will die on May 17th, 2024. The date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. Although it has been known since the autumn of 2019 that the death of James Earl Jones will be a major prophetic sign, as we can see, this email here documents that this prediction that James Earl Jones will die has been known since at least November 2021. This video is in fact a clip from a longer video, a video titled the King Tut Prophecy video, which is a very profound and very important video that must be watched. Make sure that you also watch the King Tut Prophecy video. All right, I just want to make a quick introduction to this video and this amazing diagram here. Just going to introduce a couple of concepts that aren't discussed later in the video that I want to add to it, but I'm thinking to put it at the beginning of the video. This brief extra information that is very, very important and very relevant, that needed to be added. In other words, I made this video and I woke up this morning realizing, no doubt prompted from the Holy Spirit, I believe, that something else needed to be added to this. Now I'm going to be talking about, in this video later, the 18th Amendment, which was prohibition. This was when the purchase and selling of alcohol was restricted. The reason why this is prophetic and the reason why this happened in history, one reason, a big reason, is for this purpose, for what I'm about to explain, for the end times signs. And what I am saying and what I mean by that is God has done many, many things in American history to point to what will be happening now. I know that sounds strange, but this is the case. In other words, it's sort of a lesson, if you will, or a type, as the term is in theology. This is a foreshadow of what is coming. And what it is alluding to is in the book of Revelation, where it mentions that in the end times, this tribulation period, the end of the age before the return of Lord Jesus Christ, there will be restrictions on buying and selling, is what it talks about. And it talks about this in context of food. There will be restrictions on the buying and selling of food for only those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist, described in Bible prophecy. In other words, those that do not take the mark of the Antichrist will not be able to buy and sell the rationed food in the crisis. Okay? That's what this sign here is. This is the sign that symbolizes the crisis and the rise of the Antichrist, who will be given unchecked power over every person in America in the crisis, which will include him using this power to restrict the purchase of buying and selling food, the food that will be rationed, to only the citizens that are deserving of it, those that have taken the mark of the Antichrist. Supposedly deserving, of course. And that's what this is here. This is the rise of the first commissioner of baseball, who, in a moment of crisis in Major League Baseball, was given unchecked power over every person in baseball. The Lord has used this for symbolism for what I just explained. Okay, Judge Landis, Kennesaw Mountain Landis. So more will be explained later. But he came to power exactly 666 days after the 18th Amendment was ratified. And in Bible prophecy, 666 is the number associated with the Antichrist. Okay, now what I want to add here to this information is that what I forgot to add is the history of the 18th Amendment. What was the background? What happened that this absurd moment in history unfolded? And what I mean by absurd is that even those that were passing the legislation, all of the states, they all knew it was absurd, but they did it anyway. But why did they do something like that? That would harm themselves, because they all knew that this was absurd and it wouldn't work. I mean, literally, I mean that literally. You can look this up for yourself, study, watch some documentaries on prohibition that talk about what really happened. And the point is that there wasn't this overwhelming sentiment that we need to restrict buying and selling alcohol for the greater good. There was some of that. There was a small minority that had been pushing that for a long time, for a few decades, prior to prohibition. But there was something that happened in this moment in history where everyone caved to the pressure, and they knew it was absurd, but they all caved. It was a moment of hysteria. It was a mass, and I'm going to spell the word rather than say it, because we are in a mass thing that I'm about to say, and that's why I can't say the word. So it's an Formation, all right? It begins with a form and ends with an ation, right? So we're in this mass F. I'll just call it from now on the mass F, okay? Some people call it a mass, and it's beginning with a psych and ending with a cosis. But one of the experts that has really come to be the guy to explain this, the clinical psychologist, whose name I can't also say, it begins with a des, and ends with a mund, and Matthias, and his last name begins with a des and ends with a mat. Okay? Anyway, he says that's more appropriate to call it a mass F. All right? But what this is this phenomenon that has existed in human society for a long time, for forever, but as time gets more modern and more urbanized and more, the phenomenon becomes heightened. In his book, The Crowd, A Study of the Popular Mind, and in Psychology of Crowds, Gustave Le Bon wrote about this in the 19th century, and he predicted that this phenomenon would become more exaggerated as time progressed with the increase of urbanization and people living close together. So, and that's exactly what's happened. And so we're in a mass F right now. But what was the backdrop to the mass F? And there are a number of mass Fs right now. But what they are occasions of moral hysteria. And the background to the 18th Amendment and prohibition was this desire, part of it was a moral hysteria, right? Of course, the logic being, the rationale being that alcohol was destructive for society, etc. But that isn't the whole truth.
behind the movement, because the movement was promoted by a particular group of people. It was largely white Anglo-Saxon upper class people that were promoting this movement, upper middle class and upper class people. And this was because of the resentment of the new immigrants, the immigrants that were Catholics that were drinking a lot, the immigrants from Germany and Ireland and Italy. That's the truth about it. And so there was a tribalism aspect to this. There is a reason to believe that lineage is part of a person's psychology, and it is beneficial for their genetics to, at times, group together with like genetics, people in their genetic subgroup, and attempt to persecute and exterminate the other subgroup. Okay? Now, this has evolved into not necessarily today in our time become based on simply a genetics, your ethnic background, but your political affiliation and your values, your religion. And everyone has a religion, including those that say they don't have a religion. Everyone, one's religion is their worldview, and that colors their morality, how it manifests their what they deem to be moral and immoral. Everything flows downriver from their worldview. And a manifestation of this would be prohibition. Okay? So the white Anglo-Saxons in the upper class were fearful and resentful of the waves of immigrants from these Catholic countries that were drinking a lot. That's the real truth behind it, right? It's not just, well, we need to eliminate alcohol for the betterment of people, for the betterment of society. No, it was about hatred. Okay? And that's what's going on today. And that's the truth. And the prediction being made in this video will prove this. That is the purpose of this prediction. It's to prove the controversial things that I am saying. This is the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction. And the truth of the matter is that the current mass Fs, the mass hysterias that we are in, including climate change and including the CVD disease, are in truth rooted in a hatred, a resentment for the unwashed, what they think to be the great masses of the unwashed, those that are not as good as they are. And that includes morally, because it's all about their manifestation of their morality rooted in their worldview, which is a false worldview, which is why you have, in large part, a separation between the two camps based on their values. You'll find that the vast majority of people that are in the mass hysteria regarding climate change or the CVD disease, for example, are secular atheists or agnostics, whatever that difference is between agnosticism, because, well, okay, so that's materialists. The ones that have a materialist worldview are the ones that have substituted a belief in God and a non-material reality for this sort of scientism that is not real science, but they use supposed science to further their religion, their values, okay? And what they are doing, well, although they don't know it consciously, is focusing on the other tribe that differs from them completely, because they have a completely different worldview and set of values. And it's a civil war. It's a culture war based on completely incompatible. I mean, the two sides agree on absolutely nothing. And they are completely incompatible with each other. And the one side has determined that it cannot live with the other side. Either the other side must conform and become like them, or they must be eliminated. They don't know it consciously that they must be eliminated. They're not thinking mass extermination yet, but that's what's coming. The purpose of this prediction is to prove what I have just said. God has overwhelmingly confirmed that a genocide is coming. But that's obvious to those who are awake and can read between the lines and know what is happening, right? We are in the early stages of a genocide. But that's what's going on here. And that is the backdrop to the 18th Amendment. And that's why it's so relevant to our time, because at the beginning I mentioned that God is using these moments in history to point to what is about to happen. And so what happened with the 18th Amendment is that you had all of these politicians and legislatures ratifying the 18th Amendment, even though they personally all knew it was absurd. But they had to go along because it became a movement. And if you dissented from the movement, then you were deemed part of the problem. You were part of the witch hunt. You were one of the witches that were being hunted. If you said that if the witches are those that say there is no witches, right? And so in a mass F, as the psychologist explains, and you can see this in history, for example, the totalitarian Nazi mass F or the Soviet mass F, only 30% of the people are actually true believers. 40% are going along to get along because if they don't, it'll hurt them. The other 30% are trying to fight back and wake people up and call out the mass hysteria and the witch hunt and tell people there are no witches, this is ridiculous. But those voices get drowned out. And sen begins with a sen and ends with an erd. Okay, sen begins with an sen and begins with an erd in a mass F. Okay, and so the other 70% don't even hear all of the correct, true information because of the begins with a sen and ends with an erd. Sens and then ends with an erd, right? So that's what happens, and so that's what we're in, and that is exactly what was the 18th Amendment and prohibition. Everyone wonders, how in the world could that have happened? Well, this is how it happened. It was a mass F. It was a totalitarian movement led by a minority of people that were full of hate, but they didn't know it. They thought that they were doing good based on their religion. Okay, that's what's happening, and the reason for why it's happening now and why it's in Bible prophecy is because the true Christians are in the camp, because not all quote-unquote Christians are real Christians. I'm not going to talk about what percent, but it's a minority that are true Christians, right? And anyway, the true Christians are in the camp fighting for reason, freedom, and the values that they inherited. They're fighting the cultural Marxist revolution that is staging a coup. Okay, and so anyway, they will be persecuted, and that's what Bible prophecy talks about. It talks about the persecution of true Christians by other Christians, quote unquote Christians, including other. Okay, so in other words, the persecution of true Christians is perpetrated by others, including other quote unquote Christians. All right. So I think I've explained that enough. Now the rest of this video is amazing. Now one other thing too is that in this video I will be talking about how this sign right here, this date, very important date, connects to the day that it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash on March 27th, 2024. And believe me, I know far better than you the reason why, the purpose of this prediction that is from God. It is to prove everything that I have just said. That is the purpose, make no mistake. To not appreciate that is to miss entirely the point of the prediction. You might as well turn off the video now. Okay? Now, this date here was the day of the MAN, begins with a man and ends with a date for the thing, which is the mark of the Antichrist. Okay? And it was for the 84 million workers. I knew this date would be important ahead of time because of this 84 days connection, which I'll explain later in this video. But the point is that, like I'm just saying, this all connects to the thing that will be used to enforce the rationed food will be used to enforce the mark of the Antichrist, okay? Now, this date here is 123% of a year. No, sorry, 123 weeks exactly to March 27th, the date is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. And that's relevant too because the location of where she will crash will be near where the two eclipses will cross over each other and engender an X, which is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist. This is why on this day, for example, by the way, the judge ruled in court that it dismissed the lawsuit by Blue Origin regarding NASA's awarding of SpaceX for the contract to build the lunar module, all right? And the contract was for $2.9 billion. The moon is symbolized by the number 29 because it is a 29.5-day cycle. And this date was exactly 29 weeks after the contract was awarded, on the same day that the World War I monument was officially ceremoniously opened or whatever. And in World War I, 117,000 Americans died. And that's because God is using the number 117 to symbolize the mark of the Antichrist. The reason is because the purpose of the mark of the Antichrist is to separate God's faithful from the rest. That's the plan of God, to divide. Jesus said, "Don't think I have come to bring unity. I've come to divide with a sword." Okay, that's very important. That's contrary to the non-Christian, secular, Marxist worldview, which is all about unity and collectivism, which is the reason for climate change. It's communism in disguise. It's a Trojan horse. Jane Fonda said that the CVD disease was God's gift to the left because she was correct. It was God's gift. It was a boon for the left because it furthered greatly their cause of totalitarianism, Marxism, communism, collectivism. It's all evil. And the reason is fundamentally it contradicts God's plan, which is to divide, to separate the wheat from the chaff, the goats from the sheep. The purpose of this life is to determine who will follow the shepherd and who will go their own way, which is what goats do. They can't be herded. And of course, the shepherd is Lord Jesus Christ. So that's the fundamental reason for why collectivism in all of its forms, including the supposed public health and the use of scientism, falsely using science to dictate through totalitarian means their cause, which is ultimately rooted in rebellion against God. That's what collectivism is. That's the reason, by the way, also for the left religion, which is the religion of the East, the collective consciousness, etc. It's all part of that. That's the reason for group identity politics, another form of religion. Homogeneity, the loss of the individual, the opposite of division, which is what 117 symbolizes. The middle chapter in the Bible is Psalms 117. Let it divide in Hebrew gematria equals 117, and on and on. Jesus was resurrected, first fruits separation on the 17th day of the first month. So this is a big number. And anyway, 123 weeks exactly from November 4th is March 27th, the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash near the X's of the eclipses, okay? And 123 is the 42nd prime number. And the number 42 is associated with the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. This exact 123 weeks connection is also 239% of a year. There's two reasons why that's relevant. One, God pairs the numbers 23 and 9 together frequently in his signs to confirm the signs, patterns, and connections, which is why what is being explained on this channel is God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, because it works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses to confirm a matter, as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And if we think about it, one simple way in which God would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 9 and 23. And I know this because I have been studying God's big picture of signs from morning until night for more than full-time hours for 6 years. And the reason fundamentally is 23 is the ninth prime number. The number 9 is the most important number in God's signs. And the Antichrist became the president in 2009 and was also the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 in high school. That's just scratching the surface of the reason for pairing 9 and 23 together, which is, again, the reason why 239% of a year is relevant. But also 239 is the 52nd prime number. And the number 52 God uses to hint at 2 times 26, which hints at 226, and the 226th word in Strong's Hebrew Old Testament Concordance, which is the word that means prophetic sign. Okay, so a simple way for God to identify a prophetic sign, in other words, is for him to use this number 52 in his signs. Okay, and so that's why that's also relevant. So you have two ways in which this connects. This 11 for November 4th, 2021 date. Now, the rest of this amazing must-watch, learn about diagram will be explained in this amazing video.
All right, one thing to add here is that the 84 million workers sign, as I explained, was a date that was known ahead of time because it was 84 days after the Field of Dreams prophetic sign on August 12th, 2021. That was so long ago that I even sort of forget exactly how I came to learn about the 84 days connection in the first place. I'm sure, though, it was probably because it was realized for other reasons that November 4th would be important. And then 84 being the connection being important as well, because of course it hints at Barack Obama, his birth date, August 4th. All right. And Obama is the Antichrist, who will enforce the mark of the Antichrist, which is the reason for the 84 million workers mandate on November 4th. Everything that I've just explained about November 4th, it being the anniversary of Obama's election, etc. This 84 days connection was known back in 2021 prior to November 4th. However, just a few days ago, in April of 2024, I was doing some research and I learned that the movie Field of Dreams cost $84 million to produce. Somehow I knew about the 84 days. Well, there's reasons, but I didn't know that the movie itself cost $84 million. That's amazing. Actually, I'll tell you that the reason for knowing November 4th ahead of time, which was known before the 84 days connection, was because it was the anniversary of the election of Obama, the 13th anniversary, and the 99th anniversary of the discovery of King Tut's tomb. In the Bible, the king of Egypt is symbolic of the Antichrist. And in God's signs, he pairs 9 and 13, hence the 13th and 99th anniversaries for these dates. And then it was a matter of figuring that it was 84 days and I realized, well, that is a number that symbolizes Obama. One thing that I mentioned is that his birth date was on the date 84, but what I didn't mention and didn't know in 2021 is that his name, Obama, in Hebrew gematria equals 84. So anyway, it is amazing beyond words that the movie Field of Dreams cost $84 million. And we have this 84 days connection, which I didn't even know until now in 2024. We have this 84 days connection from this Field of Dreams baseball prophetic sign. All right. Well, the Field of Dreams baseball game, which was the first regular season Major League Baseball game played in Iowa, in the cornfield, next to the cornfield in which the movie Field of Dreams was filmed, the most iconic baseball movie ever made, starring James Earl Jones, and in which he delivers an iconic speech in which he talks about how America could be great again. That date, August 12th, 2021, was exactly 190 months after October 12th, 2005, which was a prophetic baseball game in which Barack Obama threw out the first pitch. And in God's signs, pitchers on the pitching mound are symbolic of the Antichrist on the Temple Mount. Now, there are a lot of things about this prophetic game which is explained in other videos. But it was a Chicago White Sox playoff game. At the time, Barack Obama was the senator from Illinois. He had just become the senator, in fact. And this was the year that the Chicago White Sox broke their sports curse that had dated back to the 1919 World Series, which is known as the Black Sox scandal, which the movie Field of Dreams is about. The movie Field of Dreams is about the 1919 Black Sox, and hence why in the Field of Dreams game on August 12th, 2021, one of the two teams was the Chicago White Sox. All right, now, as I mentioned, the Field of Dreams game in 2021 was exactly 190 months after this prophetic baseball game on October 12th, 2005, in the year that the White Sox broke their sports curse dating back to the 1919 World Series. In other words, the 190 months connection hints at the number 19. This prophetic baseball game on October 12th, 2005 is exactly 19 years before the Day of Atonement in the Hebrew calendar on October 12th, 2024, which will be the day of the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ, when he will defeat the Antichrist on the Temple Mount. And that's why exactly 19 years before this was the day that the Antichrist was on the pitching mound, because pitchers on the pitching mound symbolize the Antichrist on the Temple Mount and his defeat on the Temple Mount. All right. There's more, in fact, confirmation for all of this as well. The game-winning hit was hit by player number 24 that ended the most controversial baseball playoff game in history, in which the Angels should have won. The pitcher for the Angels, number 45, as in the 45th president, he was shoplifted of his win by the umpire with the horrendous mistaken call. Okay. Well, anyway, so God demonstrated this prophetic sign in this baseball game with Barack Obama throwing out the ceremonial first pitch in order to reveal the date on which the Antichrist will be defeated on the Temple Mount exactly 19 years later. because God uses pitchers on the pitching mound as symbolism for the Antichrist on the Temple Mount,
hence the 1919 Chicago Black Sox. All right. This game in 2005 on October 12th was exactly 1,091 months, which hints at 9/11.
and also hints at the 1919 Chicago Black Sox World Series.
After the first commissioner of baseball was given power by the team owners. He was given unchecked power over every person in baseball in a moment of crisis. And this is symbolism for the unchecked power the Antichrist will be given over every American in a moment of crisis. This was on November 12th, 1920, in response to the 1919 cheating scandal, when the Black Sox or the White Sox threw the World Series for sports betting profits. Okay, so the first commissioner of baseball, in other words, is Antichrist symbolism. That's why he came to power exactly 1,091 months before the Obama Black Sox, or rather White Sox playoff game, and 1,091 months hints at 9/11. It is 2 1s and a 9, and God uses this pattern frequently in his signs for symbolism for the big warning of judgment on 9/11 in 2001. All right, now, the first commissioner of baseball became the first commissioner on November 12th, 1920, exactly 666 days after the 18th Amendment was ratified, which was about prohibition and the restriction on buying and selling alcohol. The 18th Amendment hints, the number 18 hints at 6 plus 6 plus 6, and 666, the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. This is why exactly 666 days after the ratification of the 18th Amendment was the day that the first commissioner of baseball was given unchecked power over every person in baseball. And that is more confirmation of all of the connections, but also that the first commissioner of baseball is symbolic of the Antichrist. Now, the reason why the 18th Amendment is extremely relevant is that it prohibited the buying and selling of alcohol. In Bible prophecy, it says that people will be restricted from buying and selling unless they take the mark of the Antichrist. Okay? And, okay, so now I'll just draw it out for you again here. From the ratification of the 18th Amendment, 666 days to the first commissioner of baseball coming to power, which is in turn exactly 1,091 months to the Obama first pitch Chicago baseball game, playoff game, which is in turn 19 years to the second coming and the defeat of the Antichrist on the Temple Mount. That baseball game is also, again, exactly 190 months, which hints at 19, and the 1919 Chicago Black Sox, to the Field of Dreams game, which is in turn 84 days to the 84 million workers mandate. All right, now, this trail of signs that I am explaining here, that begins with the 1919 Chicago Black Sox scandal and the rise to power of the first commissioner of baseball as a result. All of these connections here involving
hints at the number 1919, the 1919 Chicago Black Sox. This, for example, 1,091 months, followed by exactly 19 years, and also exactly 190 months. All of this is what makes this connection right here astounding and profound confirmation that this will be the day that James Earl Jones will die. This connection is 919 days, which also hints at the 1919 Chicago Black Sox. Again, James Earl Jones starred in the movie Field of Dreams, which is about the 1919 Chicago Black Sox. In fact, the 1919 Chicago Black Sox in the movie are standing behind him as he is delivering his famous monologue speech in the movie about how America could be great again, which is what God is pointing to ultimately. He is pointing to this in order to warn America that it needs to repent, or else it will be destroyed in his judgment. Okay, so that's why the 919 days connects to this Field of Dreams game. And by the way, player 99, Aaron Judge for the New York Yankees, was a major part of this sign. Now, I forget the details. I can't remember everything. I made a video about all of this in 2021, and I will post it again, I think. But anyway, the point is that God was using Aaron Judge in his signs, because the number 9 in his signs symbolizes judgment. That's why Aaron Judge wears number 99. But also, this lines up, and for this purpose, to the first commissioner of baseball, whose name was Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis. He was a famous judge. He was made the first commissioner of baseball. His name includes the name Mountain. Strange name for parents to name someone, but that is his name, Kennesaw Mountain Landis. And mountain is a high place. And the name Bama in Hebrew means high place. And that's also the reason for this. And pitchers on the pitching mound, who symbolize the Antichrist on the Temple Mount, is also high place symbolism. Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis died in 1944, which also hints at the 44th president. And that also, by the way, confirms this 44 days connection here, because it is predicted that 44 days after James Earl Jones will die will be the day of a solar flare that will hit Earth and knock out America's power grid, which will be part of the crisis surrounding the rise of the Antichrist. This, in his God's signs, is being described with a metaphor of a lion's roar, which is explained in other videos. And that's why James Earl Jones was the voice of the Lion King in the movie The Lion King. Also, it is predicted on the day that James Earl Jones will die, the historic barge that has been stuck on the rocks of the Niagara River since Spanish flu, which was in 1918 and 1919, will crash over Niagara Falls. And that's also relevant too, because, well, it hints back to what we're talking about here with the 1919 Chicago Black Sox. But 1918 is also relevant because, although many people don't know this, the first World Series that was thrown for sports betting profits was actually the 1918 World Series. The world caught on to it in 1919, but actually the 1918 World Series was the first World Series to have been thrown. And that World Series was thrown by the other Chicago team, the Chicago Cubs. which is more confirmation symbolically in God's signs that Chicago is the corruptest city in America, which is the reason why the corrupt Antichrist president is from Chicago. But anyway, so that's also going to it's predicted to happen on the same day. And I think that's worth pointing out in this video too, because the prediction of the death of a 93-year-old man, arguably, although I think it is, if you've got the precise date and you've got, well, I should say, all of these connections here prove beyond a doubt that this is a prediction from God. You'd have to be completely irrational and spiritually a hater of God to not recognize that. But that is a lot, it is a spiritual thing to be able to see things. And so many people won't be able to see it, and they'll just say, oh, well, he was 93, so no big deal. But if you hear the explanation in his video, of course, you would realize that that's completely irrational. However, to be able to predict the day that James Earl Jones will die and the day that the barge will crash over Niagara Falls, which has been stuck on the falls, on the river for over 100 years. Well, of course, that proves everything as well, that it isn't luck that I'm predicting the death of James Earl Jones on this date. Anyway, Niagara Falls is known for the production of hydroelectricity, and it'll be explained in other videos, but that's also why it connects to the day that the power grid will go out due to a solar flare, lion's roar on the surface of the sun. I think we are done with this diagram here. This is truly, truly profound. I'm going to cut this out and make it a clip in a separate video, a shorter video, just because it is so important. One other thing too, the 1918 World Series that was thrown by the Chicago Cubs was played against the Boston Red Sox. Okay, and so these are the three teams that had these absurdly long droughts of not winning a World Series. The three teams, if anyone knows baseball, they know what I'm talking about, are the Chicago Cubs, Boston Red Sox, and Chicago White Sox. All three of these teams won the World Series during the time that Barack Obama was in Washington, D.C. in power, either as the senator from Illinois or the president. There's a reason for that, is because the curse of the Antichrist symbolism here is parallel with these sports curses. But the reason for these sports curses is because these are the teams that were involved in throwing the World Series for sports betting profits. And so anyway, those three teams all include colors, because you have the White Sox, Red Sox, and the Chicago Cubs' nickname is the Blue Bears. So you have red, white, and blue, which is symbolic of America, which is hinting at the curse of the Antichrist on America. Another quick thing that I'll add here too, because I don't know when I'll ever get a chance to get this information out into the world again. It's probably in another video, an older video, I'm sure. But anyway, the 1918 World Series was won, the last game of the series was on 9/11 in 1918. And that was exactly 1,260 years, or sorry, months. 1,260 months after 9/11 in 1813. Okay, now why is that relevant? Well, first of all, 7 times in Bible prophecy, the period of the Antichrist and the end times is symbolized by a period of time of 1,260 days. And again, we have the Chicago White Sox here and the Chicago Cubs, and the Chicago Cubs in this case, throwing the World Series exactly 1,260 months after 9/11 in 1813. Okay, the reason why the Boston Red Sox were in this World Series in 1918, by the way, incidentally, and not a coincidence, designed by God. In other words, is that 1918 is the year of Spanish flu. The curse of these baseball teams line up with that because the CVD disease is a curse from God designed to bring about the Antichrist, and the mark of the Antichrist, which is the CVD disease thing that is put inside of people. Okay, so 1,260 months back exactly to 9/11 and 1813, and that was the day. Oh, and so in Boston is symbolism for America, and so that's, and especially the Boston Red Sox in God's signs. The Boston Red Sox and the New England Patriots because of the spiritual founding of America being in New England. All right, so we go back to 9/11 and 1813, and that was the day that the British landed at Washington's Mount Vernon estate. The Mount Vernon estate and George Washington are very important in God's signs in general, as explained in other videos. After the British landed, they proceeded to burn down the White House and the Capitol building. And George Washington's portrait was miraculously saved by the president's wife. So anyway, this was the only other time in history in which a foreign enemy attacked the nation's capital other than on 9/11 and 2001. 9/11 and 2001 was exactly 188 years after 9/11 and 1813. And that is extremely profound because God frequently uses this number 188 because the 188th word in Strong's Hebrew Old Testament Concordance is the word woe, is the Hebrew word for woe, exclamation mark, which is used in the context of extreme judgment from God in the Bible, including in the book of Revelation, for example. In fact, there are 3 woes in the book of Revelation, judgments that will be coming upon the world. Okay, so you get that now? So the 1918 World Series connects to actually 9/11 extremely profoundly. The lion's roar, the solar flare on the surface of the sun, will knock out the nation's power grid and induce food rationing, a food shortage. And this food shortage will be used by the Antichrist and Antichrist system to enforce the mark of the Antichrist. Only those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist, the thing that you can't talk about for 84 million workers, is the mark of the Antichrist, and one will not be able to buy or sell food unless they have taken the mark of the Antichrist. And this is how the restriction on buying and selling alcohol with the 18th Amendment in 1919, I believe it was January 16th, if I recall. And that's why in this trail of signs, it connects to the coming solar flare on the sun that will knock out the nation's power grid, which will lead to the restriction of buying and selling food to those who have to only those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist. So you see here, this is so profound. We have this amazing connection from prohibition and all of this Antichrist Obama symbolism connecting to the coming food rationing and restriction on buying and selling food to only those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist. Also, it isn't a coincidence at all that the flu that is named after people that are from Spain, you know what I'm talking about, occurred in 1918 and 1919. That supposedly killed 50 to 100 million people. 1918 and 1919 are the years that the 2 World Series were thrown. In other words, cheating. And that's why all of this connects. These baseball signs connect to these years. Because the truth about the flu that is named after people that are from Spain is that it was induced, it was caused. It wasn't what people think it is. It was a contagious bacterial pneumonia. And it was caused by I'm using my words carefully here, by the things that were done in a scientific research type of way. You can figure out the word that I'm trying to say there. Begins with an X and ends with an meant. Okay, so anyway, that it was caused by this research at Fort Riley in Kansas on the soldiers on their way to the trenches in World War I. And that's the truth. And I don't want to get into any more regarding that, but the point is that what was being done there, the research, was primitive things. It was the primitive beginning of the thing industry that caused it all. But anyway, that's what God is pointing to there. And also the symbolism in cheating is relevant to what I have just said as well. But make no mistake, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction, the reason for this prediction from God, is to prove everything that I have just said in this video, including the last minute, the information that I have just said in the last minute. And in case you still don't agree, believe me, I know far better than you why God has given me a voice through this prediction. All right, to explain what is going on here, we have this diagram that was made prior to February 17th. This video was made prior to March 25th. In this video, I explain at the beginning of it how the signs on this date revealed adding the 37 days to get March 25th. And this is how God's big picture of signs works. This is how it works. And the prediction will prove this. The skeptic will say, you're just continuing to make up dates, whatever. But when the prediction comes to pass, it'll prove all of the analysis is 100% correct. February 17th was a step in a trail of signs that led to March 25th, which is leading to April 11th. And by the way, the prophetic signs that occurred that were relevant on March 25th that revealed adding 17 days to get April 11th for the date it is predicted that James Earl Jones will die, and the historic barge on the Niagara River will crash over Niagara Falls 17 days later on March 11th. These signs that occurred on March 25th, April 11th, 17 days after March 25th. The signs that occurred on March 25th are explained in the amazing, profound, and must-watch Apocalypse Now video to learn about the story and the knowledge God was revealing through all of this on March 25th and the signs that connected to March 25th, etc. All right, so later in this video, you'll hear talk about March 25th, and that's important because this is how God's signs works. And if you want to know about God's signs, then you need to know about how it is a big picture of signs, which is only being explained on this channel. It's up to you whether you want to know about God's signs or not. But I guarantee you that you will miss out, because the purpose of all of this is that through these connections, God is telling stories and revealing very important knowledge. The full intended meaning of God's prophetic signs, all of them, cannot be properly understood without their connections and context with the other signs. It is a big picture of signs that produces the information that God is communicating. Okay, so it shouldn't be confusing. Simply, this diagram was made before February 17th. This video was made before March 25th. Both of these dates are dates that God was pointing to. And the signs that occurred on the dates confirmed all of the analysis.
All right. Now, as I'm about to explain, God is demonstrating a 7 days warning because the barge on the Niagara River is symbolic of Noah's flood, and God gave Noah a 7 days warning before the flood judgment, and the coming judgment that is being alluded to with the death of James Earl Jones and the crash of the barge 7 days beforehand is the predicted solar flare. This April 1st date was also a step in the trail of signs leading to the predicted solar flare. The sign that we received on this day, for example, was the 7, as in the 7 days warning, deaths in the World Central Kitchen convoy aid in Gaza. That is because the coming solar flare is predicted to cause food shortages and food rationing, hence the 7 deaths in the World Central Kitchen that were accidentally attacked by the Israeli Defense Force on this date that was expected or known in advance. This is a relevant sign. Anyway, that's also explained in the Apocalypse Now video. There's much more to that. You need to watch the Apocalypse Now video, which, by the way, the title is inferring the movie Apocalypse Now because God has used the movie Apocalypse Now in his storytelling here. All right, now that we've gotten that out of the way, the rest of this video is about so much more than just this at the end of this diagram. This is extremely important, the rest of this video. This is an amazing video. Make sure you watch all of this video. All right, what you just heard was recorded prior to April 11th. April 11th was also a major step in the trail of signs. I can't emphasize that enough. The analysis was 100% correct. God was overwhelmingly pointing to April 11th in regards to James Earl Jones and his death, which again is symbolism for the coming lion's roar on the surface of the sun. The amazing must-watch, learn about, that is an understatement, signs that occurred on April 11th will be explained in the O.J. Simpson video. One of the signs, although this doesn't communicate any knowledge to you, you should not decide whether or not to watch the video based on this. But one of the signs was the news of the death of O.J. Simpson. You'll see in the video how that is extremely important and how it ties into so many other things. I can't even describe it enough, okay? So, also, more insight has come to light. In fact, it was originally thought that the 7 days warning from the barge would be a 7 days warning before the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash, and it turns out that that is in fact correct. The barge is not part of this video really, but I did mention it, and that will be on May 12th, 7 days before it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. On May 19th, the barge will crash from a high place over the Niagara Falls, and likewise, Kamala Harris will fall from a high place in a plane crash in St. Louis on May 19th. The barge is also pointing to the solar flare, but in another way, which will be explained in other videos. That said, as I have said, God's big picture of signs is producing knowledge, and this is why the wise person will know after the prediction comes to pass that James Earl Jones will die on May 17th, that all of the videos must be watched, every minute of them. Also, this date right here, the Field of Dreams game, which was played in the same cornfield that the movie was filmed in, a movie about the 1919 Chicago Black Sox, is 1,009 days before it is predicted that James Earl Jones will die. 1,009 days hints at the number 19. And this movie is about the 1919 Chicago Black Sox. Furthermore, as we can see in this diagram, God has played on this allusion to the number 19 with this 919 days here, but also the Field of Dreams game was exactly 190 months, and 190 hints at 19, and 190 is the 19th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 19th row is 190. The Field of Dreams game about the 1919 Black Sox was exactly 190 months.
after Barack Obama threw out the first pitch, which was exactly or is exactly 19 years before the second coming and his defeat on the Temple Mount. Because God uses pitchers on the pitching mound as symbolism for the Antichrist on the Temple Mount in Bible prophecy. And we have another play on the number 19 here too, because the first commissioner of baseball, who was given unchecked power over every person in baseball after the 1919 Chicago Black Sox World Series cheating scandal, his rise to power is or was exactly 1,091 months, which is another hint at 19, and the 1919 Black Sox before Obama's first pitch, which is 19 years before the second coming and his defeat on the Temple Mount. And so you get the idea here. That's why James Earl Jones will die 1,009 days exactly after the Field of Dreams game. All right, I'm now recording this after February 17th, and it is my great pleasure to update you on what has transpired here. But I just want to add a couple of things before I explain the prophetic signs that occurred on February 17th. And one thing is that the date February 17th is why we had predicted that the barge would crash over on this date. This wasn't the only instance in which God was pointing to the date February 17th regarding the barge. We had this in 2020 as well, and in 2023. So, and I believe also 2022. If I recall. Anyway, the reason for that is that the flood began in the book of Genesis on the 17th day of the second month. And Niagara Falls symbolizes the flood. It symbolizes the power of water moving over the earth. It engenders a perennial rainbow, the rainbow being God's sign, his covenant regarding judgment in the account of the flood. And the barge that is stuck on the rocks of the Niagara River was involved at the time of it getting stuck. It was involved in the most dramatic rescue in the history of Niagara Falls, in which a lifeline was shot from the power plant to rescue the two men stuck on the barge. This is all symbolism for Noah's Ark and the rescue of Noah and his family in the ark, a type of barge, if you will. Okay, so that's that. Now, in the account of the flood, God gave Noah a 7 days warning to load the ark before the flood would begin. This is why it is now predicted that James Earl Jones and the barge will crash over the falls. James Earl Jones will die and the barge will crash over the falls 7 days, as in a 7 days warning, before the predicted solar flare that will knock out the nation's power grid. There's, of course, lots more reasoning to this than simply the 7 days warning. And one thing is that the date, March 25th, will be 37 days after this date. That hints at 3 sets of 7. That is a hint at the book of Joshua and the symbolic 3 sets of 7 that the Israelites enacted before the walls of security collapsed on the city of Jericho in God's judgment. All right, so they marched around once per day for 7 days, and then on the 7th day they marched around 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. It was a 3 sets of 7. There are also 3 sets of 3 sets of 7 in the account of the flood. In that 3 sets of 3 sets of 7 in the flood account is the 7 days warning that I just mentioned. Okay, so that's why 7 days, March 25th, before April 1st. But also, the 37 days is 888 hours. Sorry. Yes, 888 hours. And that is profound too, because that hints at Jesus, because the name Jesus in Greek gematria, equals 888. Gematria, if you don't know, Roman, Greek, and Hebrew letters are also numbers, and as such, names and words can be converted into a numeric value, and God frequently uses
this 888 symbolism in his prophetic signs to point to Jesus. And the rapture is symbolic of Jesus, the rescue in the account of the flood is symbolic of Jesus rescuing his faithful at the time of the coming judgment, which, as Peter said, this time will be symbolized by fire instead of water, which is why the solar flare, which is symbolic of fire. All right, so that's also a confirmation. So again, the way God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel, is it works on the principle of, second and third witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required, but it is also an interconnected web. The full intended meaning of the prophetic signs cannot be properly understood without their connections and context with the other signs. Because through them, God is telling stories, through the connections, through the signs connecting to each other. Like this diagram is a perfect example, with the first commissioner of baseball hinting at the Antichrist, and the Antichrist using rationed food, restricting buying and selling food, which is hinted at with the restriction on buying and selling alcohol. This is a great example, okay? And it's even identifying who that Antichrist is, Obama, because he threw out the first pitch. Okay, so you get the idea. And anyway, the point is that February 17th was a step in the trail of signs. All of the analysis for February 17th was 100% correct. If you are skeptical, when the prediction comes to pass, 37 days later, it will prove that. That, is the purpose of the prediction, is to prove that this is God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, and therefore, the important knowledge and stories that God is communicating through his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, is true. This is the purpose of the prediction that is from God. This prediction that James Earl Jones will die on March 25th is a prediction from God. And this is the purpose of the prediction, is to prove these things that I'm saying. All right, now I'm going to explain the amazing signs that occurred on February 17th. All right, this is an explanation for the amazing prophetic signs from the righteous Christian God of the Bible that occurred on February 17th, these signs that were expected in advance of February 17th, because it was known that God was pointing to February 17th, and this was known in advance of February 17th. And these signs related to, as was known ahead of time, James Earl Jones and the predicted death of James Earl Jones, and the historic barge that has been stuck on the rocks of the Niagara River, and its predicted crash finally after 100 years over Niagara Falls. All right, now this email was composed on February 18th, as we can see, and this was my analysis that I wrote regarding what had happened. I wrote to some friends here. All right, so it was expected that on February 17th, James Earl Jones would die and the barge would crash over Niagara Falls. The voice of the Lion King is symbolism for a solar flare, a lion's roar. God is using this metaphor of a lion's roar for the coming solar flare on the surface of the sun. That's explained in other videos. But that's why James Earl Jones, because he was the voice of the Lion King. On February 17th, a rare solar flare erupted. Okay, so we already knew, in fact, a couple of years ago, that James Earl Jones was symbolism for a lion's roar. That actually has been known since 2020, at least early 2020. All right, because it's been known since 2019, the summer of 2019, that God is using James Earl Jones, and then I forget how long it took to figure out that he was. This was hinting at this coming solar flare, lion's roar on the surface of the sun. But anyway. The point is that we already knew this a long time ago, and we knew about February 17th ahead of time. That's why it's astounding beyond words that on this date, we received a solar flare sign. It's just amazing. On February 17th, a rare solar flare erupted. And that's what makes it a sign, because it's rare. I'll explain, but this is news. It was a news story, in other words. Okay, a rare solar flare erupted 200,000 kilometers high above the sun. Now, what made it exceptional? Let's see. I don't know. Let's see. Do I write it? Where do I write it? Well, I'll probably explain it later on in the email, but I'll just explain it now. What made it rare is that it occurred on the South Pole. Solar flares do not typically erupt on the South Pole. They erupt at the equator of the sun. And not only did it erupt on the South Pole, but it was exceptionally high, like extremely high. So this is unheard of. It was a news story because of this. It was 200,000 kilometers above the sun, and it was at the South Pole. So let's move on. This solar flare sign was exactly 188 weeks. This is a number God frequently uses in his signs, but it is important. It is a huge thing when he does use it, because it hints at the 188th word in Strong's Hebrew Concordance, which is the word that means woe, ! Used in the context of extreme judgment from God. That is appropriate, this connection of exactly 188 weeks to this solar flare, because the solar flare is a sign that's pointing to the upcoming woe, which is the predicted eruption of the sun that will knock out the power grid on April 1st, 2024. Okay, so this solar flare sign, though, on February 17th, was exactly 188 weeks after this amazing prophetic sign, which was the first, and God uses firsts for his signs, the first ever detected super flare. This was a new term invented because of this discovery. The first ever detected super flare on a star located right in the neck of the constellation Leo, the lion, which, because of this, the media dubbed this news story the lion's roar. The super flare was 20 times more powerful than any solar flare ever detected on our sun. That's why it was a super flare. And the 20 times also hints at the 200,000 kilometers for this rare super flare on February 17th, exactly 188 weeks later. Now, the date isn't the actual date of the super flare. This was the date that it was first reported. The published study from the university that discovered this. All right. But that was the day that the media called it the lion's roar. That was the headline. All right. So this is amazing. I mean, this is one of the main signs, actually, regarding the coming, eruption of the solar flare on the sun. And so it profoundly connects to this date that we knew in advance was a Lion King, Lion's Roar date. Okay, so it doesn't get any more amazing. All right, now, this February 17th date was also 4 + 4 days after the Noah flare. So there was a flare that was a news story as well. It was an X-class flare. But what made it a prophetic sign, this particular one, was that it emanated from sunspot 7595, if I recall. Now, I can't remember everything. But whatever the number was, and I think that is the number, but it, in Strong's Concordance, the 7,595th word, or whatever number it was, is the word Noah. Okay? And again, February 17th, maybe I explained it earlier in another video maybe, but the date February 17th is Noah symbolism, because the flood in the account in Genesis began on the 17th day of the second month. That's why we have this amazing 4 + 4 days connection between these two solar flares, the Noah flare and this solar flare on February 17th. But why is 4 plus 4 days relevant and important or significant? Because the 44th president is the Antichrist. But what confirms this, and this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel, it works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And so we need a second witness to confirm this 4 plus 4 days connection. It's not enough to just have the 4 plus 4 days and go, oh, cool, 44th president. No, it's not enough. We need a second witness. But God does this when it is his signs. And the solar flare on February 17th is 44 days before the predicted solar flare. This date, 4/1, April 1st. And this date was known before this 44 days connection was known. All right. So that's amazing. We have 4 plus 4 days and then 44 days connecting all three of these solar flares. One of them is a predicted one in the future. Astounding. Now, regarding Noah symbolism, 7 days before this is March 25th, and that is the date that it is predicted that James Earl Jones will die and the barge will crash over Niagara Falls on the same day that Jones is predicted to die. The reason for the 7 days is because in the account of the flood, God gave Noah a 7 days warning before the flood waters came. And the barge is Noah's flood symbolism because Niagara Falls is symbolic of the power of water moving over the earth, and it engenders a perennial rainbow, and which is the God's sign regarding his covenant with man concerning judgment. And the barge was involved in the most dramatic rescue in the history of Niagara Falls at the time that it got stuck. And that's symbolic of the rescue of Noah and his family in the ark. Okay, so that's why the barge will crash on March 25th, predicted. This is the prediction, because it'll be 7 days before the predicted solar flare that will knock out the power. Furthermore, Niagara Falls is associated with electricity, the hydroelectric power plant there. And furthermore, that's how the men were rescued. The Coast Guard shot a lifeline from the top of the power plant in order to pull in the men trapped on the barge. Okay. And by the way, March 25th is 37 days after February 17th. That hints at 3 sets of 7. In the account of Noah's flood, there are 3 instances of 3 sets of 7. God uses 3 sets of 7 in context of his judgment. This comes also from the book of Joshua when the Israelites enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7 before the walls of security of the ancient city of Jericho collapsed in God's judgment. They marched around once per day for 7 days, and then on the 7th day they marched 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. Okay, and so the reason why James Earl Jones will die 7 days ahead of time as well is that'll be part of this sign in conjunction with the barge crashing that will indicate a 7 days warning before the lion's roar on the surface of the sun. The solar flare on February 17th was exceptional for its height. The solar flare on February 17th was exactly 1,117 months after James Earl Jones was born. That is amazing, so amazing beyond words, because again, this was known ahead of time. February 17th was known ahead of time to be exactly 1,117 months after the birth of James Earl Jones. But, and also the sun being alluded to with this connection because it's high above the earth, symbolically. So, Bama in Hebrew means high place. That's why God uses this number to point to the Antichrist, to identify him. All right? Okay, and that's because the name Barack Obama means lightning from heaven, heaven is a high place is a metaphor in the Bible for heaven. Lucifer, it is said, fell from the high place. And Jesus said in Luke 10:18 that he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. And so Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. Barak means lightning, Obama means high place or heaven, and O in the language Jesus would have spoken, Aramaic, means from. And so Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. And this is why God uses 1,117 in his signs for this purpose, because either Jesus didn't know what he was saying when he said this, or he knew that there would be a famous president named Barack Obama and said this anyway, knowing that it would confuse us, or he was revealing the identity of the Antichrist. Obviously, the latter option is the only one that makes any sense. All right, so there you have the full explanation for why this is so amazing, because the solar flare that occurred on February 17th, as I just mentioned, was known, it was a story because of its height. And that's why we have this 1,117 months exact connection to February 17th. All right, the rare solar flare on the south pole of the sun on February 17th was 220.55% of a year after the solar flare over the south, after the solar eclipse, I should say, over the south pole that pointed to Shackleton's Endurance ship. And the date of the eclipse was December 4th, 2021. So there are actually, I can't recall for you the details of the other eclipse over Antarctica that also points to Shackleton's Endurance ship. But the Endurance ship is a coincidence because Shackleton and his crew ended up going on the most epic test of endurance in all of history. And it just so happens that their ship was named Endurance, and this is because it hints at the endurance of the saints. Now, the reason why 220.55% is relevant is because 220 symbolizes Jesus, because the 220th word, well, first of all, 220 is 2 times 110. This is why on 9/11 it was 2 times 110 stories that collapsed, because Jesus in his first coming officially arrived on the date 110, which hints at 110. Therefore, the second coming is symbolized by 2 times 110. That's why on 9/11 the 2 towers that were 110 stories. But also, the 220th word in Strong's Greek Concordance is the word for rooster, which symbolizes Peter in Christianity. And Peter's name means rock. It is the Greek word for rock, and in the Bible, rock symbolizes Jesus. And Jesus is symbolized by this lion's roar that's coming on the surface of the sun. Now, 55, because this also hints at James Earl Jones, who was born near Memphis, and lots of other signs, Graceland, etc., and the I-55 highway. Well, it's just, okay, so let's leave it there. Explained in other videos. Okay, so now, the eclipse, in turn, was exactly 9 weeks before the Endurance 22 was launched, and exactly 13 weeks before Endurance 22 discovered the Endurance ship. That's a great story, but not for this video. 9 times 13 equals 117, the date of the resurrection of Christ. Okay, so I'm just going on the details here, but you get the idea. So the South Pole solar flare was discovered by an Argentine astronomer. Okay, this one on February 17th I'm talking about. Okay, it was discovered by this Argentine astronomer. I think he was an amateur astronomer. I'm not sure about that, though. Probably not, because it's the sun, right? I don't know, though. But the point is that the Antichrist, the first of the 2 Antichrists, Pope Francis, is from Argentina. The solar flare was 3 days after the Kansas City shooting, after the Super Bowl, the victory parade, which was 3 days after the Super Bowl, which pointed to Francis. Okay, the Super Bowl was all about the number 13 as explained in the Swift Super Bowl video. All right, and it was all about Francis. That's why San Francisco was in the Super Bowl. And these 3 days connecting with with the number 13, that's the day that Pope Francis was elected. All right, and the Super Bowl was about how Kansas City won by 3 points, 3 seconds remaining in the game. The quarterback passed for 333 yards, etc. In the overtime, the third period, all right, etc. So I don't know. The article needs to be read to appreciate the solar flare and how it was rare. So I'm writing to my friends there, but I think you got the idea. It was rare because it was from the South Pole, and it was 200,000 kilometers above the sun. Anyway, there you have it. There you have also the explanation for how February 17th was an important step in the trail of signs that is leading to the predicted date that James Earl Jones will die and the historic barge will crash over Niagara Falls on March 25th, which will be a prophetic 7 days warning before the predicted solar flare on the sun, a lion's roar, that will knock out the North American power grid. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the BitChute.com or the Odyssey.com channel. And do it now in case you aren't able to later.